Scrap huge salaries for council chiefs, part renationalise the railways and open British university campuses overseas. What do you make of those thoughts? That is some of the proposals in what Ukip is calling its vision for the North East. The report has been co-authored by the North East MEP Jonathan Arnott. He joined me in the studio earlier on and told me a little bit more about some of the thoughts they've put forward in this document.
A fair immigration system is one which treats people wherever they come from in the world in the same way. You don't say that somebody from France or Greece or Romania can come to the UK with really no questions asked, but that actually it's very difficult for someone from, say, India or New Zealand, even if they're highly qualified, to come to the UK. What you want is a level playing field for everyone, and then you want to make sure that the people who do come to the UK are, of course, the people who bring the skills that we desperately need in our economy, as opposed to having a massive oversupply of unskilled labour in sectors where British people could be doing those jobs.
So is that effectively a points-based system?
Well, yes. I mean, a points-based system is a very good way of achieving that. That is, of course, Ukip policy that we have a points-based system. I mean, I would personally be open to any way of making sure that we have a fair immigration system that brings in the people that we need for our economy, but doesn't disadvantage people and doesn't cause wage compression.
I'm not going to focus too much on immigration. It's something we do talk about a lot, Jonathan, but this is quite an extensive document. I also want to talk about transport. You say in this document you'd like the government to tender for rail contracts. Is that basically you saying that we should part renationalise the railways?
No, what I'm saying is that the government should have the power to do that, is something which is available and happens in other European countries. I'm not saying that should have to happen, but actually what I am saying is that that there have been a lot of problems with the railways in recent years, and actually when things have gone into public ownership for a time, actually they haven't been as bad as all the sort of memories that people have had of the 1980s. I think the world's moved on a little bit since then. It's just highlighting some of the things that post-Brexit, that actually if you haven't got things set up in that way, that we can then start to do it.
Now, you've mentioned the B word twice there. I'm keeping a tally, OK? Brexit. Another thing in this document, the idea of an overseas university campus where foreign students would pay for a degree from a British university, but they'd study abroad. But surely we want those students to spend money in Britain. And also, why would the likes of the EU allow Britain to build a university once we've left the European Union?
Well, first of all, you're talking about the European Union. I'm talking about the whole world. And it might be that you might want to build a campus in developing countries, in areas maybe like India, like China. I mean, you've got to look at the number of students from somewhere like India, actually. The decline in students from India coming to study in British universities. And part of that, actually, is because we currently discriminate between EU students and non-EU students. And so we make it hugely expensive for non-EU students to come to the UK. We then see a decline in people coming from around the world, and quite why people on the left seem to think that this is somehow going to hurt diversity. Actually, it's the opposite. We want to treat people from across the whole globe fairly and reasonably. So that's not to say that we don't want overseas students coming to the UK, but of course we do, because overseas students coming here, they do bring money into the economy.
But wouldn't it take money out of the local economy? If you look at the bars and the restaurants for example, on Linthorpe Road, when the students are back at Teesside University, and there's so much activity around that area. That's something that you potentially take away from the town.
Of course not. Of course not. We're not
Why
saying
not?
that
People might choose to go abroad instead.
Because we're not saying to have fewer foreign or overseas students coming to study in the UK. What we're saying is,
but if people make that choice, they might choose that's a better choice for them.
We're saying that if a university can find ways of expanding, of getting more students in total, that actually the British education system, certainly in terms of higher education, is one of the best in the world. Let's remember that the UK has 6 of the world's top 25 universities. And actually, that's something that we should be building on and looking at ways to develop. It's not about cutting anything down, far from it.
I want to talk about devolution, because you propose scrapping the current plans of devolution, but surely that gives us a greater say of what happens in the North East if we take some of those powers away from Westminster. So why would you want to scrap those plans?
Listen, I'm perfectly happy for power to come from Westminster down to local level. And of course, that's what Ukip is all about. We've always been about taking power from Brussels and bring it back to Westminster, and then we want to take that same power from Westminster and give it straight back to the people. The problem that we have with this system of devolution is effectively we are concerned that this is creating a system where the big urban centres are going to dominate. The rural areas are going to lose out in quite a big way. Everything is so focused in the northeast, around Newcastle, around Sunderland, around Middlesbrough, and that problem is only going to get worse under these proposals. What I want to see is proper devolution. I want to see more powers going back to local councils. That's the best way of doing it.
But the local councils are working together with the devolution, and they're in the best place to say, this is what we need.
But this is something that is classic as a problem of what we mean with when politicians do things in the wrong way. It's devolution that's coming from the top down, not from the bottom up. It's a Conservative government saying, we want to have this form of devolution, and if you don't like that form of devolution, you're not getting the money. Well, that isn't the way that a government should be interacting with local councils. Actually, you see local councils, whether they're Labour, some Conservative, Lib Dems, Ukip, a lot of them have huge concerns about this, but they're really being browbeaten into it by our government.
Final question then. We've only mentioned the B word about 4 times. Actually, my tally isn't really going up that much.
I don't think I said it once since you counted it 2.
I think I said it, so I'm counting my own mentions here. Oh,
that's cheating. That's cheating.
Sorry. Exactly. Listen, Jonathan, the North East post-Brexit. Do you see a place for prosperity? Do you see a place that can move forward and have a bright future?
Absolutely. I mean, you look, for example, at the fishing industry in the North East, which has been absolutely decimated as members of the European Union because the vast majority of the value of our fish is currently caught and landed by foreign flagged vessels. That's something that we immediately get back at the power and the control over, and the ability to rebuild a fishing fleet that has been destroyed.
But you want to sell licences to foreign fishing vessels in this document.
Well, look, what we're saying is that when you're talking about over 70% of the value of our fish are currently caught by foreign flagged vessels, we simply don't have the capacity at the moment. We've decommissioned our boats, so we've got to rebuild that fishing fleet. And actually,
by inviting more foreign fishermen in?
No, fewer, because you don't have to allow 70% of the value of your fish to be fished by foreign flagged vessels. That might be 30% or 40%. There's still an awful lot more for British fishermen, but the money that comes in from those licences, then we can use to rebuild our fishing fleet and allow that to develop. So actually, it's a self-financing policy that immediately provides support to our fishermen to expand, to build. And I think that is an absolute no-brainer for me. That's what we should be doing. But it's not just about that. It's about across the whole range of the economy. We are a region that makes things. We're a region that builds things. We're a manufacturing region. And yet we've forgotten that over the last couple of decades. And that's something that we really need to get back to and make sure that we have policies that promote the development of our manufacturing in this country.
Well, that's the North East MEP, Jonathan Arnott, who joined me in the studio a little bit earlier on to discuss that document co-authored by him.